Welcome to Shut Up and Say Something. I am your host and creator of the show, Deedre Daniel. This podcast is all about how to live a fascinating life, and we're learning how to do that one interesting conversation at a time. We try to stay away from discussing politics, religion, and the ad nauseum topic du jour, but anything else is fair game. Did you start a new job? Or have you been at your job for a while, but many of your coworkers are new? If it feels like you're working with strangers, then now is the time for you to build stronger relationships at your job. We recently went through and I'll put it in air quotes, the Great Resignation. And some people branded it the Great Reshuffle. Other industry thought leaders waxed poetic about going through the Great Renegotiation, where workers could demand huge increases in pay. And now we're going through the Great Layoff, which should probably be called the Great Regret. When the Great Resignation started, I began telling audiences during my keynotes that we would soon have the great regret if companies did not prioritize facilitating stronger connections at work. And they didn't. And here we are. Human connections are so important. And you do not need to be physically present to build strong ones. It's nice, but it isn't necessary. All this talk about remote work creating a hurdle to developing workplace relationships is inaccurate. You don't turn a stranger into a trusted confidant simply by sitting close to them. If so, everyone seated on crowded planes, trains, and sporting events would have solved all the world's problems by now. Think about it, like these strangers already have more in common than many people who sit next to each other at the office. At least the people on the planes and trains are going in the same direction together. They may even share the same destination and events that they plan to do while they're there. And the people at sporting events are clearly rooting for one team or the other with the same goal in mind: winning. I managed a hybrid team for 11 years, long before it was the cool thing to do. And before that, I supervised people who I could physically see every day at the office. And I learned you have to manage different situations differently. Duh, that seems like a very obvious thing to say, right? With a remote workforce, you need to be more scheduled, purposeful, and consistent with your communication instead of relying on managing by walking around. And just because you can see someone doesn't mean that they're actually giving you their best effort. Regardless of the location where the work is done, the first thing you need to do is establish trust. I mean, we're all taught as children not to trust strangers, and we carry that belief forward the rest of our lives. Yet, we need to trust our colleagues and bosses in order to openly debate and discuss opposing points of view without becoming hostile. How can the best ideas at work win if people are not comfortable presenting and discussing them? How can total strangers, people who don't trust each other, accomplish anything together? Think about it. How can you work towards a common goal when you don't think you have anything in common? How can you confidently recognize problems early on and tackle them together? We also need to develop empathy. How can we empathize with others if we don't know how they're feeling or understand their point of view? And how can we accurately anticipate their reaction if we haven't taken the time to know them? A group of strangers means your teams are not functioning as a team. Morale will suffer, your business will suffer, and then people will quit or be laid off. In episode 32, I spoke about what to do if you're laid off or think you'll be going through a job transition soon. This episode is about what to do when you start a new job, specifically managing relationships and establishing your professional brand to set you up for success. Even if you have been in your job for a long time, chances are you have a new boss or coworkers, so make a point to get to know them. And if you are the boss, it should be your number one priority to get to know your employees. So even though this episode is geared towards employees establishing themselves at a new job, there are many lessons for management and tenured associates too. Now, starting a new job can be exciting yet nerve-wracking. You may not know anyone at the company and you don't know what the culture is like. And it can feel incredibly daunting if you are working remotely and don't get to meet people you will be working with in person. Building relationships is essential to succeeding in any job, and developing trust with your colleagues and boss is critical. For those of you with short attention spans, which is most of us these days, right? Here's a quick outline of some strategies for establishing rapport with employees and bosses. I will follow that outline up with a more detailed list of things to do and questions you can ask others to build rapport at work. So number one, make connections early. Making connections early is critical to building relationships in a new job or when your team has experienced high turnover or a sudden increase in new hires. Reach out to your colleagues and boss as soon as possible to introduce yourself and express your enthusiasm for the job. Ensure you tell them key facts about you, such as your professional background and experience. And send an individual email or give them a virtual call to make a positive first impression. Note, if you send an email, people sometimes compare them. So keep that in mind that emails are shareable and could very well be forwarded. So don't send the same form email to everyone and don't put anything in writing that you don't want to be shared with the world. Number two, establish clear expectations. When starting a new job, it is important to make sure you have a clear understanding of what is expected of you. Have conversations with your boss about your goals, deadlines, and deliverables. Ask any questions to ensure you're on the same page, like how quickly and when do you expect us to respond to emails? And, do they expect a response? I'm going to put in air quotes like after hours. Some companies are moving, and I think this is a great movement. They're moving towards this thought of not sending or responding to emails after hours. And there are even some countries that are pushing forward some laws that prevent this from happening. It's this definite definition between work life and home life, but other companies expect you to pretty much be on 24 hours a day. So you need to know what they expect. And hopefully you figured that out before you accepted the job, but find out what's going on there. And then another question to ask is, what does success look like in this job after 90 days? I don't want to scare you, but new jobs don't always work out. It's a lot like dating. So I know many people who started new jobs only to lose them shortly thereafter because no one was clear on the goals and the perception of their work was unfairly evaluated 90 days into the position. So get your goals in writing. Ensure they align with the overall strategy of the company and focus on those instead of all the bright and shiny objects that float by you daily. If you have multiple bosses who assign conflicting projects or shift priorities on you, pull them together to get them on the same page so that you are working on what matters most to the organization and you're evaluated fairly at that 90-day mark and that 6-month mark. Number three, ask for feedback. Asking for feedback is a great way to show that you're invested in doing a good job. And requesting feedback from your boss or colleagues can also help you get to know them better. And the feedback will give you an idea of how they work and it'll help you develop your relationship with them. And another reason why this is so important is just because someone's in a position of power doesn't mean that they know how to give feedback. And a lot of times people shy away from giving constructive feedback to other people because they're not sure, number one, how to give it. And they're also a little worried that you're not going to receive it well. So make it easier for them to tell you early on areas that you need to improve upon, and don't get your feelings all hurt, when they tell you. Act on it. Be grateful that they told you, work on it, and then show them that you've improved. And that'll make you a more valuable employee as well. So number four, show that you care. A big part of building relationships is showing that you care about the people you work with. And you can do this by expressing interest in their work, giving genuine compliments, not about their appearance, leave that alone. Some people are a little testy about that. But then, remembering small details about them, that matters too. Showing you care will help build trust and foster good working relationships. I developed a habit of buying a stack of greeting cards with different messages on them. And the reason why I buy them all at once is because I'm a busy person and the world is still moving around me at a very rapid rate. So I have them all in a drawer by my desk. And the reason why I did that is because someone is always going through something, but I don't always have time to go to the store and find the right card. And that's a deep thought by Deedre. Someone is always going through something. But seriously, though, all the people in your life also have lives. They will be celebrating a promotion. They bought a house. They got a puppy. They welcomed a baby into their home. They sent their kid off to college and they have all the mixed feelings that comes with being an empty nester. They bought a new car. They closed a big sale at the office. And life is filled with tragedy too. They could be experiencing a sudden serious illness where they lost a loved one. Then there are those wonderful people who did something nice for you. So always send thank you notes. And I'm talking snail mail. If you were in the office with them, you could always just drop this on their desk. But to mail them something to their home, people are thrilled to get real mail. Like our mailboxes are filled with Bed Bath and Beyond coupons, bills, and pretty much junk. So sending these cards and little gifts will help build relationships remotely and enable you to stand out because no one else does them. Sending a text is nice, sending a card means more. I once gave my boss a handwritten thank you note after he gave me harsh feedback, and he was completely stunned. And then he treated me oh so nice after that going forward. And he continued to yell at everyone else but me. And I could tell some of my peers were like, how come she never gets yelled at? And they probably should have given him a thank you note. A little side note, one of my new favorite online card and gift shops is called Always Fits. Check them out. I love them so much. They crush pretty hard on things from the 1980s and 1990s, and some of their greeting cards have swear words in them, which you don't see in traditional cards. It definitely makes an impression. I may do an affiliate program with them. They are not paying me at the time of this recording for my recommendation, but maybe they will in the future. So there you go. Full disclosure for advertising purposes and all that kind of stuff. But definitely check them out. I adore this site. All right. So number 5, connect outside of work. Connecting outside of work can help you build deeper relationships with remote employees and bosses. Getting together for team building retreats, I mean, that's great, but sometimes budgets and schedules don't allow for that. Plus, typically those only happen maybe once or twice a year. So you should put forth the effort to maintain those relationships between those more structured group get-togethers. So schedule virtual coffee dates or lunch breaks to better get to know your colleagues and boss on a more regular basis. And you can also suggest activities you can do together, such as online games or movie nights. One of my favorite activities with my team back in the day was binge watching a show. And what we did is we would watch a 30-minute episode together. And after it ended, we had 15 minutes to quickly make calls, work on projects, answer or send emails and messages, or huddle up regarding other projects, address any pressing issues. So we had this 15-minute timer going. And we did that for an entire day, eating our lunch during one of the episodes, bonding, talking about the episodes, and then quickly doing work in between each episode. And we got so much done and we had a lot of fun. And this is something that you can do remotely because it's easy to stream content now or in person. Either way, it works. Building relationships in a new job can be challenging. Still, if you make it a priority, you will quickly discover that there's a significant return on your time investment. One of the best ways to get to know your colleagues and new boss is to set up a 17-minute virtual coffee break on Zoom, or you can have a longer in-person coffee or lunch. And I suggest doing this with 1 or 2 people at a time. Make it clear that you want to get to know them and you're doing this with others so they don't think you're asking them out on like a romantic date. So you want to make your intentions clear. So if you're a leader within the organization, you should openly encourage these meetings, which takes the initial awkwardness out of it. You set the tone. And if you make relationship building a daily priority, others will too. So let's say you're new to the organization and the boss is not leading by example or encouraging people to get to know one another. You need to take the initiative to do this. And you could send an email like this: hi, whatever their name is, being the new person at the office, I wanted to take some time to get to know everyone. The reason why you say I wanted to get the time to know everyone establishes your intent. That way they know that you're not hitting on them or trying to set up a date with just them. You're trying to get to know everyone. So that's why you say, I wanted to take some time to get to know everyone. And then you follow that up with, do you have 17 minutes for a Zoom chat this week or next? And if you work in person, you could say, do you have time to get some coffee or grab some breakfast before work or lunch, something like that, or just a quick break in the afternoon. So why 17 minutes for virtual meetings? I'll explain that later. Most people will find this refreshing and they will happily set up some time with you, but some will not. Don't worry about them. Don't chase after them. Simply take a note that they're not people, and you could maybe win them over later with an interesting article or maybe sharing a new spreadsheet formula. Just move on. But sometimes people will ignore you simply because they're very busy and they have pressing deadlines. Another reason, they could just be painfully shy and a little afraid of sitting in awkward silence with you. If so, they may approach you later when they see how you've interacted with others, and then suddenly FOMO kicks in, and then they want a part of it too. You're dealing with people, you're going to have different reactions, but for the most part, people are going to agree to it. So once you schedule these meetings, you may wonder what to ask them. And I suggest you come prepared with at most 5 questions, and you want to mix them up, 2 personal, 3 business, or vice versa. And after you build rapport with them, you may mutually decide you want to have another coffee or lunch later on. And that's great. If not, move on. That's fine. You got to remember your goal here. You're not looking for a new best friend or life partner. All you're trying to do is establish business relationships and trust to improve the working environment for you and everyone else. That is the purpose of this first round of meetings. Okay, are you ready to take some notes? I'm going to give you a list of business questions to ask colleagues, and I suggest picking 2 or 3 of these max. Otherwise, it could feel like you're sizing them up or formally interviewing them, which could make them uneasy. So number 1, what inspired you to work at this company? This question will help you understand what drives your coworkers while also helping you create a more meaningful relationship with them. Number 2, what made you decide to pursue this career path? This question can help you gain insight into your coworkers' professional journey, allowing them to create a more personal bond with you. Number 3, can you give me any tips or strategies that have helped you succeed here? This question demonstrates that you're open to learning from your coworkers and that you are eager to further your professional development. Here are 8 other questions you could ask. Number 1, what do you like about working here? Number 2, what do you find most challenging about your job? Number 3, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for our team? Number 4, what do you think are the biggest challenges our team is currently facing? Number 5, what would help our team most right now? So some of these you could see where your questioning could develop into some strategies, possible solutions, and then you could work together on those projects. Already that's increasing your value to the company. Another one to ask would be, is there anything I can do to make your job easier? Being helpful is a great way to build relationships. Number 7, what do you think are the most important skills for succeeding in this job? This one is great for gathering feedback and establishing your plan to achieve your goals. And asking a similar question differently will yield different results, like, what advice do you have for me as I begin my new job? So pick 2 or 3 from that list. Note that many of these are great questions to ask if you're still interviewing for the job. A lot of times they'll ask you to meet with other team members. And so come prepared to the interview with some of these questions. It's a great way to build rapport and learn more about that job before you accept the offer. All right, so now you need some personal questions. I suggest leading with these and then moving into the work-related ones. I hope you're still taking notes. All right. So the following is a list of good, get to know ya, work appropriate, yet personal questions to ask. So the number 1, you could always ask about travel. Like, if you could travel anywhere, where would you go and why? Travel is a great topic because it allows you to learn what excites them. And talking about future travel plans also like allows you to dream together, which helps with bonding. And you may discover that they've never left their hometown. If you do, don't criticize them. Just take note that something is holding this person back from exploring the world. Most people want to travel, but there are some people that don't. and you've learned a lot about them if you find out they're one of those people. And another one, group of questions you could ask would be about like their hobbies, if they have any pets, any sort of outside work interests. Those are very easy and natural questions to ask other people. The topic of family is a little difficult. People will define their family differently, and it's important not to make assumptions about their home life based on your experiences. So ask a more open-ended question like, can you tell me a bit about your family? Or what was it like growing up in your home? And that allows them to decide how much they want to share with you. So that's the best way to approach it, I think, is can you tell me a bit about your family? You don't want to say, do you have any kids? Because what if, what if they've been trying for so long to have children and they're not able to? I mean, it's a very sensitive subject for a lot of people. So don't make assumptions like that. So can you tell me a bit about your family? I mean, they might have grown up without parents. They might have grown up in a foster home. You don't know. So give them an open-ended question, and that allows them to decide how they want to share their life with you. You may be aware of the card game and game show I created where I ask more off the wall kind of questions. And since you're new to the company, I think it's best to play it a little safer and go in with these more traditional questions. And then after you build more rapport and you have a better feeling for the other person, work your way up to asking some of these other questions I have in later meetings. I have heard over 1,000 answers to some of my favorite questions that I have written. So I know how to navigate a conversation if it goes on a wild tangent or takes a weird turn. And the stakes aren't as high for me because I'm not having these conversations with people at a brand new company where I'm dependent on them for a paycheck. And I can also confidently look a stranger in the eye and ask them how they would milk a cockroach, which takes a little bit of practice. And I want to set you up for success. So I'm taking this more traditional approach with you today so that you are not branded the new cockroach milk employee. Okay. So that's why I'm not leading with more, I would say, off the wall kind of questions. So that leads me to this next section because I realize some of you are going to Google or do other online research about questions to ask. And I thought I would do that myself. I caution you against trusting the internet for some of these helpful tips. So for instance, I asked Write Sonic's chatbot for a list of fun questions to ask people to get to know them at work. And it instantly gave me a list. And I don't think these are good ideas. I really don't. I'm saying the robot is wrong. I read them and I thought, whomever's programming the robots doesn't get it, which in a way is good. It probably means the robots are not actually taking over for a while, for a little while at least. So here are some creative questions that artificial intelligence suggests, which I think are bad ideas to use at the office, and why. Are you ready? Number one, if you could be any type of animal, what would it be? Okay, this is a dumb question. And I will confess, I asked my employees that in an awkward team building session. It was probably 2009 or 2010, somewhere around then. I know for sure it was in Austin, Texas. And the problem is that the person answering it knows they're being evaluated. They know it's one of those lame, get to know you kind of questions, and their answers being, over evaluated. And it is often asked by hiring managers who think they're being oh so creative and asking it in interviews. And intelligent people will typically say something like a dog because they're loyal and hardworking. My friend Sheila once answered this in an interview, and she said rhinoceros. And she landed the job because her answer was different. It made them laugh, and she was able to intelligently back it up. That said, leave the tired, what kind of animal are you question for the unimaginative and the dull. And if you are asked this in a job interview, use the dog answer. You say a dog because they're loyal and hardworking, or stand out with Sheila's rhinoceros response. Unfortunately, I don't remember what she said to back it up. So perhaps Sheila, who I know is a listener of this show, will send me what she said to back it up, and I'll include it in the show notes for you going forward. Okay, number two, suggested by artificial intelligence, which I think is wrong. It suggested, what's the most outrageous thing you've ever done? And I'd say this one is good for conversation with close friends or perhaps a date, but not at the office. And the reason being is it's a double-edged sword. If the other person hasn't done anything outrageous, their vanilla response paints them as boring. But anything too outrageous could hurt their professional brand. And unlike the professional questions mentioned earlier, the people you ask will expect you to answer these personal questions too. Do you really want your new colleagues to know that you streaked through the Florida State campus at 2:30 in the morning after hitting the bong a few times and doing a really long cake stand at an around the world party in the dorm? Or do you want that time you stole 12 bags of cotton candy from the circus when you were 11? Do you really want that information out there for the world? Or what about the time you had sex on the 50-yard line in broad daylight? Yeah, those are outrageous things. Do you really want people at work knowing those? Save those stories for maybe many years after you've established yourself as a dedicated, hardworking employee. If your goal is to advance into upper management, it would be wise to keep those completely out of the office chatter. People at work do not need to know everything about you, so don't pressure others to bare their souls to you either. And that brings me to number three. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? All right, this one's just as lame, overused, and boring as what kind of animal are you kind of question. I mean, what are you really going to learn about them as a person? That they want to be invisible or travel at the speed of light? What did you really learn about that person? Same with what is your favorite movie of all time? All right, first of all, there's so many movies out there, it's hard to pick a favorite. A common response is, I don't know. Or maybe they have 50 or 100 or 1,000, or they have lists upon lists of the best movies out there. You're going to be talking about that for hours. And the recipient of this question knows their taste and intellect are being judged, and they might not want others to know that they watch Magic Mike every night before bed. So they will announce something more cerebral to sound intelligent. And what have you learned really about this person? Your relationship is now founded on a lie. Another question to avoid at the office that AI is recommending: what is the strangest dream you've ever had? Yeah, okay, so this is interesting for a date or when hanging out with friends, but I would avoid this at the office because we often dream about topics that could land us in HR or raise an eyebrow or two. So avoid getting too personal with coworkers. I would say this early in the game. Another question that AI recommended, and I think this one is really pointless at work: what would you do if money was no object? All right. Most people, seriously, don't like their jobs. And they wouldn't be there talking to you if they had more money. So don't ask a question that forces them to lie. I mean, what are they going to say? Oh, I love my job. I would do this exact same thing. I would just live in a nicer house, travel more, and finally pay off all my credit card debt. This comment is more likely to drag down the energy of the conversation as you both sink into the reality that you both are trapped in your circumstances. I mean, this question is also better among friends or dates because they can be honest with you. And the next question the robot suggested: what is the craziest thing you've ever eaten? All right. People think this is a simple question, and I hear it all the time. And it seems innocent enough because food is a common denominator. But a wise person once said to me, never yuck someone else's yum. And I've been guilty of this. I will see something and think, oh, gross, who eats that? Yuck, right? But many cultures eat food that others think is exotic or gross. And you could accidentally offend someone by talking about how crazy it was to, for instance, eat bugs or intestines for dinner. And it also shows you're not well traveled or cultured and you're not sensitive to other dietary customs. I mean, let's think about this. People are starving worldwide. And shockingly, many children do not have something to eat, and they're living within walking distance of our homes in America. And in a world where food is expensive, scarce, or the production of it is unsustainable, we all may be eating bugs or lab grown meat very soon. So be sensitive when using questions about food to get to know someone initially. I wouldn't avoid it. I think there's a better way to rephrase it. So something along the lines of, what is your favorite comfort food or dish to prepare? And remember, do not yuck their yum. For instance, I don't like salmon. I can't stand salmon. So if I were to ask this question, like, what's your favorite food? And the person's like, oh, I love salmon on a cedar plank. I'm not going to go, ew, gross. I just might say, oh, cool. I really like stone crab or something like that. Just sort of deflect. You've learned they like salmon. They know you like stone crab. And then you just move on from there. All right. The next question AI recommended was, what is the most embarrassing moment of your life? Once again, do you want to disclose that time you had a condom wrapper stuck to the back of your leg when you gave a 7-hour presentation to a group of executives at your old job? Think about what you want others to know about you. What do you want them to think about you after you share that story? Remember, they will most likely share it with others. You're the new person at the office. They just learned something juicy about you and they're going to go off and share it with someone else. They may not want to answer this question for the same reason as the what is the most outlandish thing you've ever done question. As you are asking these personal questions, they will expect you to answer them too. And this is your time to establish a new reputation or personal brand. So be careful and strategic about these questions and how you answer them too. Number 10, recommended by the robots. If you could have a do over of any moment in your life, what would it be? Once again, this is good with friends and family, possibly a date, but not when you're at the beginning stages of establishing work relationships. Some people you work with are very friendly and they want to be on a cohesive team and they like a little bit of, I would say, oversharing and you can trust them. But it takes a while to build that trust. And it also should take even longer for them to earn that trust with you. Others are in it for themselves and they will use any information you give them that showcases your weaknesses for them to broadcast it to others. And their intent is to block you from getting a promotion later. So let's not lead with some of your past mistakes, especially when you're trying to establish your professional brand when you're first starting a job. So as a new employee, prepare for someone to ask you to tell them something no one else knows about you or an interesting fact. This is another one of those common and dull questions people ask. It's right up there with, tell me about yourself. So don't be stumped by it. You need to expect it and have a quick 2-minute response that highlights your professional strengths. So, for instance, if they ask you to tell them an interesting fact and you are applying for, or perhaps were recently hired into a sales role, you should tell them that you sold the most Girl Scout cookies as a child. It paints you as a natural born salesperson. It sort of goes into their mental file of, okay, this person's really into sales. I made a good hiring decision, or this is someone we should definitely hire into this sales role. I remember I hired a guy once who told me that he used to sell Mary Kay makeup when he was younger. That's a special shout out to Gary with 2 R's. And that reminds me, when I ran the sales and service training departments at Geico many years ago, we had multiple training classes going. We were going through this big hiring push. And so we had all these training classes going, and I would say roughly 100 new hires coming through at any given moment. And as a young manager, I will confess, I asked the old tell me an interesting fact question because I was trying so hard to remember everyone's name. And I'll never forget this one class where the answers were beyond bizarre. And so I remember one guy said, my house is filled with boxes. I don't unpack anything ever. All my stuff is in containers because you never know when you suddenly have to leave town. And one of my goals as a manager was associate retention. And I thought, well, this guy's a flight risk. At any minute, he's just going to leave town without any notice at all. And then the next person sitting next to him said, my grandmother is a witch doctor. It's amazing what you can do with snake oil, potions, and how well curses work. And you should have seen the look on everyone in the room, like, ha, 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 gonna be nice to her. And then the next person said, my family runs a cemetery. It's so interesting to see what people bury with the dead. And we always have fresh flowers in our home, which is so nice. And I remember looking at the trainer and thinking, okay, did you tell them ahead of time weird answers to give to me, or is this legit? I mean, this was legit. It wasn't rehearsed or anything. And, despite what I was thinking, I diplomatically nodded and smiled after all those responses. Oh, by the way, the third new hire, the one that works at the cemetery, proceeded to bring me flowers the next day. And these flowers were complete with dirt on the bottom of the basket with the card still in it that was addressed to the family of the deceased. So you never have a second chance to make a first impression. No truer line has ever been spoken from an old dandruff commercial. So now you have a list of questions to ask and some to avoid with your new coworkers. And I would say after doing this for at least 10 people at the company, set up a similar appointment with your boss. Set it for a short period of time, but different from standard meeting blocks like 17 minutes. And I mentioned using 17 minutes earlier when scheduling a virtual break. Why use that number? They will remember it, and it doesn't take up a valuable 30-minute spot. So make sure you stick to the time, unless, of course, your boss continues to talk. So don't book anything close to this meeting just in case they want to chat with you longer. Obviously, let the meeting go over. So if you're still taking notes, which I highly recommend, here is a list of work-related questions you could ask your boss. So number 1, what is the best advice you have ever received? Number 2, what's the best thing about working here? Number 3, what's your proudest accomplishment? Number 4, what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful team? Number 5, what do you think are the most important skills for succeeding in this job? Number 6, what do you think would help our team be more successful? Number 7, what do you think are the biggest challenges our team is currently facing? Number 8, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for our team? Number 9, what do you think is the most important for me to learn in this job? And number 10, what do you think is the most important thing for me to remember in this job? So you see how they differ ever so slightly? And you could ask those questions in an interview even before you were to accept the position, as well as future meetings with your boss. And I would say 3 other questions, and these are good for gathering feedback. What should I focus on to make the biggest impact? And what do you think would help our team build better relationships? And after they answer, you could, of course, then make a little plug that you've already met with 10 different people because you're taking the initiative to build those relationships. And they'll find that impressive if they don't know about it already. And then another good one would be, what would be the biggest help to you in your job? And so you're offering to help them, perhaps with a special project or something. So keep it to 3 or 5 questions in total so that they do not feel bombarded. Once again, mix up some personal with some professional and end it by asking for some feedback if possible. So pull from this list of questions at future meetings, ask 1 or 2. This list should keep you going for a while. And always send a thank you email thanking them for their time. Time is so valuable. You never get it back. So always get in the habit of thanking people whenever they give any of their time to you. Build on your communication and relationship from there. So continue setting up those get to know ya, rapport building meetings with your coworkers. Your boss may be too busy to do this with you again, because if they do this with you, they're going to have to hold similar meetings with everyone else, or it might look like favoritism. If that's the case and they don't have individual coaching meetings with you, always have an elevator pitch about what you're working on or little wins so that when you see them in passing in the hallway or elevator, you can mention it to them. That's also good for their boss and their boss as well. You always want to be sprinkling this little bit of information about you, cultivated, curated information to all the people in the organization. And you can also mention like books that you've been reading or a project that you're working on. And if you work remotely, you can mention these things by sending a direct private message on chat in video calls like Zoom, before the meeting begins. Remember, all opportunities come from people. People give us promotions, proposals, and propositions. And entering a new job is an excellent opportunity to broaden your network. Your network is your most valuable asset. So you always want to continue to grow it and cultivate it. So make building relationships a critical component of your career success. I wish you many great things in this new chapter in your life. Congratulations on getting this job. And if you are in a position where you haven't landed a new job, I want you to remember it's going to happen. Stay positive. Even if you can't see it on your horizon, you need to believe that it's there. It's coming. So go forward, my friends. Be interesting. All right, you stuck around after the ending show music for the bonus material. I started this at the end of the Romancing the Podcast episode, and people really liked it. And so I've tucked little stories in here. And I have a confession. It was me. I was the person with the corner of a condom wrapper stuck to the back of my calf, which I had only discovered after I strutted around a room teaching Understanding Geico's Growth for 2 hours to managers at all levels within the company. A very kind woman asked me during our first break if I had cut myself while shaving, and she acted as if she thought I perhaps had a band-aid on my leg. You know, the shiny band-aid shaped like a triangle that say TRO on them. Think about that for a minute. Yeah. Well, at least the people were paying really close attention to what I was saying. I mean, they were mesmerized, really focused on me as I moved about the room. That class lasted a full day, so I had to continue teaching as if nothing had happened. And for clarification, this adult activity happened at my home earlier that morning, not at work, with a partner whom I was in a committed relationship with. And we spent probably 20 minutes looking high and low for that missing corner of the wrapper, and we had given up. Mystery solved. So there you go. That's my most embarrassing moment, or at least one of them. See you next week.